thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a conversation with Dr. Zachary Karl, the VP of Business Development at Invizyne Technologies. And it's important you understand the genesis of this call came about very quickly as from feedback from investors like yourself, interested in not just what the technology can do, but how does that translate into business development activity. So I think rightfully so, investors have asked, where do we see this tech actually move into commercialization? And Zach, no pressure. It's all resting on you to make these things happen. So wanted to welcome you and thank you for agreeing to come into the gauntlet here.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Lou.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into it, I do just want to cover, because we're in the middle of an active offering, marketing an active offering, to refer everyone to the forward-looking statements and disclosures that you can find here on the screen. We will most likely be making forward-looking disclosures today. We want to make sure that you understand the risks and uncertainties that come with those statements, as well as the risks and uncertainties that come with any offering. So for that, we encourage you to cure your insomnia and go to the sec.gov and read the risks and uncertainties that are included in the company's registration statement. So now, with that out of the way, let me more formally introduce you to Zach. Is it all right if I call you Zach, or should we go by Doc?
Zach is just fine.
All right, good. Well, listen, I think what makes me most interested in this call is you're in a unique position, because you're not coming just as the closer and business development guy from Glengarry Glen Ross. You actually have a deep science background. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to share with everyone, just to contextualize before we get into the business development discussions, what your background is, your experience as an entrepreneur, but then also in biz dev and in this industry specifically.
Yeah, sure. So I do have a technical background in nature. So I do hold a Ph.D. from Purdue, where I studied enzymes, enzyme systems, and how they could be applied to industry, various industries, for manufacturing various products. So, the theory behind this technology is, and this technology in general is not new. That was a decade ago that I was doing this, right? It was always the commercial viability aspect that is what this team has hit a home run on. So anyway, my background was studying these systems, so I'm very familiar with how they work, and that's allowed me to translate that value and communicate that to really any audience. I can do it to somebody with a technical background, a hybrid technical business, or somebody who's purely the business. So I can always convey that value to that individual. That's helped. Shortly after graduating, wrapped some IP around some of the findings during my dissertation, and spun out a cell-free company from that. Within a year of proof of concept, we successfully exited. So I thought that was easy, right? Entrepreneurship. This is easy. But shortly after exiting that company, I went and worked for Poet, the largest ethanol company out there, as Enzyme. Where their main technology for converting sugars into ethanol, and sugars from various sources, whether it was 1G, the cornstarch, or 2G, the corn stover. So I was there in a hybrid R&D business development role, where I led some of our strategic initiatives with some of the larger players out there. Specifically the Poet DSM. Health and wellness industries as well. Started a few companies there, got them up and running, and then dove back into large industry, where I joined a biopharma company. I was doing something pretty phenomenal, where they were they basically had genetically engineered cows to produce fully human polyclonal antibodies for different biotherapies, but we focused on COVID, oncology, diabetes, and influenza. So I was there building, developing, scaling their antigen production platform. Shortly after that,
that was at SAB, correctly?
That was at SAB. Yes, you're okay. Right. That was at SAB Biotherapeutics. And so while I was there, there was a gentleman that I had sat on the other side of the table from while I was at Poet, who had been at Novozymes. And he reached out and asked if I'd be interested in joining Ginkgo Bioworks, just given my background in the various sectors that Ginkgo plays in, which is ag, industrial chemicals, pharma, and nutritional wellness. And I said, yes, I jumped at the opportunity. And so I spent a few years at Ginkgo in a business development role, playing across, various verticals there, meeting a lot of industry players there. And that's when, while I was there, I met Invizyne. Didn't know Invizyne existed at the time. I feel they did what a company should do, which is build in somewhat stealth mode, get to a commercially viable state, and then go out and talk about it. And so that's when they approached me, is when they were starting to go out and really discuss it and talk about it. And I jumped at the opportunity, just knowing that cell-free, is the future. It was just, it was always 10 years away, and you needed somebody to take it to that commercially viable state. And so I jumped at the opportunity.
So let's go back a little bit here. I want to dig in on this because I think two things. One, you had the unique experience of being on both sides of the table. So you were, as an operator, entrepreneur, bringing to market stuff, sitting across from people that want to do biz dev deals, and then also the leader of those biz dev deals. But you just made a statement about you jumped at the opportunity for Invizyne. I mean, you were arguably at the 800-pound gorilla in the industry. What was so different that it immediately clicked for you in your background, the science side, where you knew that this was something different? And then to your point, that it was ready for commercialization.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this is not a new idea. It was always 10 years away. And I didn't know anybody had figured out the secret sauce just yet, which is, so what Invizyne has done, big picture, is they've really distilled it down to the necessary, right? So they've basically taken the technology from within the cell, the technology that's actually doing the magic within the cell, and freeing it from the cell. So while I was at Ginkgo, I didn't know anybody had truly figured that out, just yet. And so that's the North Star. That's where everybody's pointing. That's what every industry is trying to do, is basically simplifying it down to the necessary, or simplifying it down to what's exactly needed. And that's the next step in the iteration of SynBio, is going from the cell to what's actually in the cell doing the work. And that's all you need, is what's in the cell doing the work. You don't need the cell. And so that's why I jumped at the opportunity, because this is where everything was pointing in synthetic biology.
Yeah. And you said, so I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I know investors will give me a hard time if I don't on this. You thought it was always 10 years away. What gives you the confidence that it's still not 10 years away, right? You said this was the next step, isolate the enzymatic pathways that are important. Maybe examples. How do you see what Invizyne is doing in terms of molecules they're producing that proves to you, hey, this is something we can now go strike deals with that can get to market?
Yeah. So it all comes down to, and this is what has plagued biotech in general, is you get a lot of very smart people in a room, and they create something, and then they go out and they ask, who wants this? And there's nobody who's raising their hands. But this technology is a need, right? It's people have been saying they need this technology for years and years and years now. And why I keep saying that it was always 10 years away is because when you do take those enzymes outside of the cell, which is what my company was doing a decade ago, it's very unsophisticated. They work for a little bit of time. You make a little bit of product, and it's never going to be commercially viable. You're really hoping that they either buy the assets from you, or there's some sort of a huge sustainable premium that you get on that product to make it somehow feasible. I think what we've seen in the markets is that the consumer's not willing to pay for sustainability. And so what these folks have done is they've figured out those extra things from inside the cell, which is cofactors and things of that nature that you need to actually power the enzymes and make them, last and work. They've figured out how to actually do that in an economical fashion through some of the patented technology they have, which is balancing that energy and that cofactor recycling and things of that nature. And that was always really the secret to getting it to a commercially viable state. Because if you have to put all the enzymes in and it only works for a couple hours and you're only getting a little bit of product out, it's never going to make economic sense. And so what they figured out how to do is, get to cost parity with some of the more traditional manufacturing approaches out there. So we don't have to rely on sustainability wording or anything like that. It's just a plus that we have that this is a very sustainable method, and a lot of people are looking at this, but then they don't have to, force that extra premium on their consumer then. We're actually making it in a more sustainable fashion at parity with traditional manufacturing processes. So that's like the golden ticket right there.
Yeah. So the economics work finally. So therefore it gives you the confidence to go out. So let's start talking a little bit in general, and then we'll try and get more specific on the biz dev side. Can you just characterize for us at this stage, again, understanding that Invizyne is still a new company, you're new to this role, the maturity of it is, you've been in stealth mode. What type of business development activity are you seeing right now? And then characterize it. Is it accelerating? Just give us some generalities around that just to frame this conversation.
Yeah. Kind of heads down, learn everything we could about the company, about the technology and whatnot, so we could speak to it, elegantly and things of that nature. And so we really hit the ground running relatively recently, end of last year, early this year, and the traction has been substantial. I knew.
Well, folks, here we have technology is amazing when it works properly. I was worried that it was me that was cutting out. So just bear with us for a second. I've just communicated with some of the team members here that it was Zach and that was cutting in and out. So obviously, we'll go back, we'll rewind. I do want to encourage you in this lapse while we wait for Zach to rejoin. If you do have questions, we're going to take that question and answer. Just please use the Q&A function that's built into Zoom. There's a couple of questions that are already been submitted. As the conversation's going on, it just helps for us to see those questions. We can organically work them in, but then also that way we're not waiting at the end for questions to enter the queue. So I encourage you to do that. We will get into more specifics as soon as we get Zach back here. But if there's any questions that we can answer in the interim right now, while we're waiting for him, about the offering, about the proposed timing, please do go ahead and enter them in as well. All right. He's back. You just like to make me sweat and dance and try and, fill in the details for you. So
sorry about that. Was that on my end? I'm sorry.
It was. I thought it was on my end. So why don't we rewind a little bit? We were, talking about the trajectory of business development activity since you really were operating in stealth mode for a while, and then now just kind of been going after it meaningfully.
Yeah. So the traction has been immense since I've got here. Like I said, I understood that this was desired, wanted, needed, but I didn't know, who we would have to teach about this space and things of that nature. But it seems that it's been on everybody's radar for a long, long time now, and they were waiting for somebody to figure out that secret sauce, and we finally come around. So there's a lot of companies out there that are needing to de-risk their supply chain. So they're bringing technologies in-house to be able to produce these ingredients themselves, and they're looking to companies like ours, and specifically ours, to help them do that. A lot of companies want to reduce their footprint, which our technology allows them to do as well. And there's also regulatory hurdles that are either in place or are on the horizon. And it's not just, GMO cell-based. A lot of chemical synthesis routes in various parts of the world are also coming under scrutiny, or currently they're just not allowed to be put into practice. And we can circumvent all of those things with our technology. But again, there's also a sustainability play here, where, the technology does have a sustainable nature to it. It's enzymes, it's bio-based, again, reduced footprint, but we're at that price parity where they don't have to, again, move that high value onto their consumer and make them pay more. So they're kind of having their cake and eating it too. But in terms of industries and whatnot, we can play in various industries that a lot of these other technologies just simply can't play in. So, the pharma industry is one of those. We can do some unique things there. Enzymes are nature's kind of surgical tools. So we can do very precise things within that industry that even medicinal chemistry just simply can't do or overcome. But then in the foods, flavors, fragrances, cosmetics, nutraceutical space, from a business perspective and a technology perspective, We've had a lot of interest from that sector, just because if you think about it, that sector, a lot of those companies, their total revenue is made up of hundreds of different products, right? Not just one blockbuster, things like that, but hundreds of different products. And so they can't afford to pay somebody, tens of millions of dollars and wait 2 to 3 years for one of those ingredients to come back in a synthetic biology manufacturing type of a process. And so, our process lends itself to being very, very quick in development cycles, which gets the product to market incredibly fast. And then our development process is orders of magnitude cheaper than what it would take to do some of the stuff in the cell. And so it's very alluring for that segment. But then also interestingly, we can also play in the industrial chemicals market, as I'm sure most of you know, the isobutanol.
Let's definitely get into that in a little bit. Those are some of the specifics. I want to go back because I had a conversation late last week, which we'll release as soon as we get approval, with Tyler Corman, VP of Research, but then also Yannick Bombel, which is the lead scientist that's working in collaboration from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab. And he made a statement just similar to what you said, that you're making, now the technology allows you to make things that other people can't. And that's significant. He was really intrigued by that as well. So let me ask you this. How do you prove to potential partners that you're having conversations with that you can make these things? I mean, what have you made already as a company that gives you, and then more importantly, the potential partners, confidence that you can make the molecules that are under consideration?
Yeah, sure. So we have a plethora of case studies, right? A lot of our case studies are things that we've developed, have really been grant driven, if you will. So where the grants kind of take us to do, but every aspect or every path that we've taken to all sorts of different products and development processes has all been successful. So these are really case studies that we can point towards and give the customer or the potential partner a lot of confidence that if we were to partner with them, we would also be successful in what we're doing. So, 3 of our big ones are terpenoids, the cannabinoids, and the isobutanol. And to your point, on the isobutanol front, one of the downfalls of anything cell-based really is some of the toxicity hurdles. And so we've been able to overcome that simply because we're not using the cell, right? There's no cell, so there's really no toxicity issues to overcome.
Right.
So the example I like to point towards is there's a technology out there that was trying to use cells, and they were getting to roughly 10 grams per liter, before the cells were dying. So that there's an expensive separation step to keep it going, and it's just not commercially viable. We're north of 300 grams per liter, right? I mean, and we're keeping on going. So that's just
okay. So that was the comparison. There was 10 versus 300 in terms of. So when you say case study, I just want to be clear to everyone. We're talking about actual in the lab. You've made these molecules. So terpenes, flavors and fragrances, cannabinoids, which are multiple. How many cannabinoids has the company made now? I know there's roughly 140 cannabinoids in the endocannabinoid system that we're aware of. What are we focusing on? And then isobutanol is obviously the sustainable fuel. So, cannabinoids, how many have we made, and how big could that market be?
Yeah, so it's probably not about how many, but it's the types that we really differentiate ourselves on. And so we can do obviously some of the more common ones. That market's fairly saturated, right? The interesting thing with the more common ones is we can actually do things to those more common ones to make them more effective within the system, which a lot of larger companies are actually very interested in that technology. But where we really thrive is we can make a lot of the rare cannabinoids that you can't get from a natural extraction process or a cell-based process in any meaningful amount, and we can make those in bulk. And then new to nature is another interesting one where we can make compounds that have never been seen before, that, potentially can work better than some of the known cannabinoids out there. So those are kind of the three, buckets we play in within cannabinoids, and we've made multiple cannabinoids in each of those, and we can point towards them. And again, it gives customers just the confidence that we can do other things that are similar, right, within that construct, if you will. So, we can do different flavonoids and terpenoids and things of that nature as well. So again, just a case study to point to, but it's a industry, the cannabinoid industry, that is garnering a lot of interest. Just as you mentioned, it's the largest, receptor system in our body. A lot of people are studying it, and a lot of the research and clinical data that's coming out that it's a great therapeutic target for various different things out there. So yes, and then what was your other question there? Were you
No, I
talking about
think you addressed it. Yeah, we'll
Okay.
get to that in a little bit. Like, I think now let's get into, this could be a little bit more like a PTI, just more rapid fire type of questions that
Sure.
should be easier, straightforward. Just help us understand how many, I think it was in one of the presentations, it was mentioned that you're under a number of NDAs. I mean, what can you share? Not names, obviously, but is it a couple dozen? Is it a handful of NDAs that you're in discussions with? What does that look like in terms of that stage?
Yeah. So, we are definitely more than a couple dozen NDAs.
Okay.
And that just speaks to, again, the level of interest in this technology and what it's garnered since we've gone out and recently started talking about it. And like I said, this has been a lot of outbound, which is, I call it fishing with a single hook. Which is us going and talking to folks. I have a lot of connections in the industry, various folks within Invizyne have a lot of connections within this industry. And so we can go and talk to people that we know and whatnot. But, we're starting to do a lot of inbound, which is, getting out white papers, hosting webinars, doing things like this, where people see us and we're not making the effort to go out and talk to them, but it's kind of fishing with a net. And people see us. And so we're just starting that, but that's a very powerful tool. And so that number is probably going to explode very, very soon.
Yeah. So where is that at? I mean, so NDAs as connotes or denotes getting to a certain level of conversation. What's the broad number of conversations that are going on right now at any phase?
Sure. It's north of 100.
Okay. So north of 100, that's amazing. Big number starting out. Then help us understand how you, as the head of biz dev, stratify those conversations. Are there different stages that you see, how, that you've defined stages for the progress and at what stage does it go to NDA, and what, can you categorize those stages, or what defines each stage?
Sure. It's a stage gated process. And that's really to make sure that we move only the most promising and valuable deals or partners or projects through the funnel, if you will. And so, you have the initial stage, which is outreach, and then the next stage under that, stage one, which is the initial conversation. Typically, if that goes well, that goes into an NDA process, and then you get on to stage two, which is kind of technical alignment. Stage three is starting to talk about terms in terms of the deal, but also how a project or whatnot would look like. Stage four would be your term sheet. You're actually doing that, and then stage five would be your definitive agreement. And we have a very nicely balanced pipeline right now where we're moving, a lot of those conversations, those initial conversations through that process. And so, to your point, we do have a lot of folks under NDA, but we also have a lot of folks that are lower or further down in the funnel process, where we're starting to talk about what the terms would be of working together.
Okay, so let's get into that, because I think that's helpful to understand that these aren't just conversations, right? People think about biz dev and nothing's there until there's actual terms put on paper. So it sounds like that's happening. What do terms look like? And maybe at this point, again, we're going to talk generalities. I'll bring up the slide that's in the investor deck that separates out the kind of the four categories of potential partners. And it looks like, it should be shooting fish in a barrel. There's so many, but that could also be a distraction. So let me bring that up, and then we can maybe go through each one and say, in this category for, active pharmaceutical ingredients, the terms of a deal would look like X. And for, sustainability, energy, it would look like Y. Are you comfortable doing that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So why don't we start while I'm pulling this up? If we talk through pharma and APIs, I know while you're during your time at Ginkgo, your tenure, I happened to look that there were some major pharma deals done with the likes of like Merck and others that had what I would consider biobuck deals, upfront payments, research payments, and then potential milestones that were in, the hundreds of millions. Is that something we could think about here too as a potentiality? Was that what you'd characterize in the pharma space?
You're always typically you're going to have three, like you mentioned, three buckets of revenue, which is, like you mentioned, the R&D upfront costs, the R&D fee. You're going to have some sort of a licensing fee as well. And then, typically you're going to have some sort of downstream value share, whether that's, commercial milestone payments, royalty attached to their revenue, what have you. Pharma is a very long-term play. And it's risky. It's a risky play, but the potential value there is enormous. Now you need to balance that value, how quickly it comes in. So, if you're going to try to tie all of your value to the commercial milestone payments or something downstream, the value share, you're going to be making your shareholders and stakeholders wait a significant amount of time for a lot of that value to come in. So that's, just broadly to your question, each and every deal is scrutinized for, a lot of things. There's a lot of criteria that goes into not just the opportunity, but the partner itself. We're going to be very selective in who we go with, but how we structure a deal is also going to be based on, again, that product. How quickly do we feel it could get to market? How quickly do we feel that partner could get it to market? How confident are we that they have the market presence to make this successful? What is the size of the market? All of that goes into how we weight those three different buckets, so that we do see value, as quickly as possible. But also, intermediate and long-term value as well coming from those things. So we don't want
so
to.
When you look at that, like just to pull from a comment you made earlier in this conversation about the flavors, food and fragrances, right? These are known products that they need. They can't wait forever. The market is established, unlike a pharmaceutical or a nutraceutical where it's unproven, might have a development timeline. How do you prioritize? Like, is the breakdown of number of conversations, are you prioritizing the quick to market food, flavors, and fragrances while going down parallel paths, but understanding it's longer for pharma and energy transition? I mean, what's the balance as you lead biz dev activities?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So, it is the balance of immediate, intermediate, and long-term value. And so I see pharma as a long-term value type of play. It's substantial, but it's certainly long-term. I see foods, flavors, and fragrances as more immediate. As you mentioned, those products are already in market. All they really have to do is switch out their manufacturing process to our process, and it's the same molecule going into the market. So they're not doing anything different. And so that's more immediate. And then the industrial chemicals is probably something that's a little bit more intermediate. That's between the foods, flavors, fragrances, cosmetics, nutraceuticals, and the pharma. And so, we are very, and as you can see from this picture, there's a substantially more amount of pharma and food, flavors, fragrances companies than there are the industrial chemicals companies, right? They're a larger footprint. They always come together and join into single entities and things of that nature. And so the balance here is, we're taking an approach that a lot of our time and attention goes into pharma and APIs for the long-term potential, but a substantial amount of our time and energy also goes into food, flavors, and fragrances for more of that immediate. And then the industrial chemicals, also has some of our attention for that 15 kind of a way where, you're kind of 45% pharma, 40% foods, flavors, fragrances, and maybe 15% industrial chemicals. And that gives you that nice balance of revenue coming in.
All right. Well, that's a good understanding. I appreciate that context. So let's kind of break it down a little bit more. So, like, if food flavors and fragrances is the near term, what types of revenues in a deal could we expect? Like, in a typical, again, I know I'm making gross generalizations here. I'm not asking you to get into specific, but give us what would be a typical deal in food flavors and fragrances in terms of revenue size, when revenues would start, what that could look like.
Given our DBTL cycle, so design, build, test, learn cycles is where we differentiate ourselves a lot from the cell-based, right? Cell-based, those cycles, a single cycle can be months, and so it takes them years to get to market. Ours is weeks, so it would take months to get to market. So in terms of getting to revenue, we could sign a deal today, and start actually making, or them licensing our technology, or us bringing it to market together, whatever they prefer, whatever makes the most sense. We could do that within a year. That's
Okay.
That's not an issue for this technology because of how quick we can do those development cycles. That's what it kind of comes down to. In terms of revenue, what's really interesting about the foods, flavors, and fragrances is that you are it's not a one-off deal for a single ingredient. And that's what I was saying before about how our technology aligns with these folks who have, let's say 200 or so different products that make up their billions in revenue, right? And so we're going to have, intentionally, we're going to have, 10 to 15 to 20 deals for each ingredient with a single company. And that's the most efficient thing you can do.
So like we use like a McCormick as an example, right? They make everything from taco seasonings down to whatever you can imagine. So you're saying the scope of a deal would encompass a molecule that's used across multiple product lines so that the volumes for Invizyne and the revenue potential would be significant.
That, or, you actually have multiple product targets, within a single company that makes up a massive amount of revenue, if you will.
Okay, and then the revenue model, is it a percent? Is it like a royalty-based model like we see in semiconductor sales? Like, what is it, a volume-based? I mean, how would it work in the food, flavors, and fragrances?
Yeah, same as what we were talking about before, where there would be some sort of a development R&D type of a fee, where we would do the work to develop this technology, and they would pay us for that, and then they would typically license the technology from us, right? It could be an exclusive, non-exclusive license. That'll factor into how valuable that license is. And then to your point, yes, there's a downstream value share that can be commercial milestone payments, an upfront commercial, payment, or it can be, royalty structure. And again, that all comes down to what makes the most sense in that situation.
Okay. No, that's good. So it's helpful for as investors as we look at this for food, flavors, and fragrances. We could expect as you ink these deals that there'd be some type of development fee and revenues that come relatively quickly if this is a design, build, test process of weeks and months, not years, a license fee once you prove it out, and then milestone and royalty fees within inside of 12 months beginning. So that's near term. What about industrial chemicals? You typify those as being more intermediate term. How does a deal structure look like there?
Yeah, with that, there would be some scale up, and that's really where some of the timeline would extend, is scaling the technology to meet just the large volumes that they have. So that would probably be a single type of a product, high value. So the value would be high, but the margins would be low. So there we would probably garner less of a percent royalty, if you will, just because, we can't take a lot of their margin because their margins are so thin. So it would be a lot more, upfront. But again, just due to that scaling timeline, which could be, a year to 2 years, that's why it would be more intermediate before we see some of that value coming in from some of those upfront kind of payments. Whereas the foods, flavors, and fragrances, we could see some of those royalties and things of that nature within a year, and they have higher margins, so we can capture a little bit more value from those deals as well.
Okay, and then I think everyone understands. Well, why don't you give us the context for pharma? We talked about that. We understand that there's upfront development and then milestone-based payments that always look great in the headlines, but as you said, take time for shareholders to recognize. You got to get there. I'm just trying to put on a timeline for investors. Food, flavors, and fragrances is here. It could be 6 to 12 months after signing a deal. Revenue starts. Industrial chemicals is, call it 12 to 24 potentially. Does pharma and energy transition fall in the 24 to 36? So you mean what does that look like as you pursue those? Is it closer in some cases?
Yeah, and it depends on the target. If we do, go with the cannabinoids, that can be a lot quicker because we've developed that. It's ready to go. We do have some conversations going on. That can be very quick. So that can be, within, however long the clinical trials, kind of take, which is typically, a year to 2 years. We can get somewhere very, very soon. Something new that we're doing with a partner, development and whatnot. That's why you want to not have a one size fits all. We're going to do the work at cost to bring people onto our platform, and then our licensing fee is this much, and we try to get a bulk of our value from downstream. That's why you don't want to do that with pharma, because like you said, you don't want them to wait. And so, even though the timelines on pharma are a little extended, same like energy transition, you can do things to capture a lot of that value up front. So, maybe in pharma, you're not going after a 10 to 15% royalty on the back end. You negotiate that down to a 6 to 7%, and then move that value up front to the licensing or the development fee. So there's things you can do to make sure that you do capture a lot of the value up front and not wait for it.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful context. We're getting a bunch of questions, which I want to get to. I've got two more from my side that I want to make sure we ask, and they're one's pretty quick. The other one should be pretty straightforward too. I look at this table here. I see a lot of huge companies, right? And I'm from the Northeast, from Jersey. We got a guy for everything, right? Everything's about pick up a phone and being able to get in touch with the decision makers, whether it's for, mundane routine stuff in everyday life or big things like this. I got to imagine it's something similar in biz dev here. You've been in an industry for a while. Do you have that one-to-one where you can pick up the phone and talk to the top from top to top at a broad spattering of these? How many guys do you got, in other words?
I don't know if the term Rolodex is still a thing. Yeah. But, my Rolodex is pretty vast, just from having been in all of these industries before. I know a lot of these folks, and to your point, I know a lot of the stakeholders at a lot of these companies, which is you can talk to companies, but a lot of the times you're not talking to the right person at the company. Yep. And that's one of the things that I have going is I can I already either know the right person to talk to, or I can get to that person and I know who that person is. So yes. Look,
and it's important. And I encourage, you got a lot of guys, and I want to encourage the investors on this call to go ahead and go to Ginkgo's website and their press releases and just look at the number of press releases about strategic partnerships, collaborations during Zach's tenure there. And I think that'll be a testament to just the proof point behind what he's saying, that it's a relationship. We all know that. And then it's converting on those relationships with a good technology, and in this case, a superior one. So last question for me, and then we got about a bunch of questions from other people that I want to get to, is just, you haven't done a business development deal yet. That's not a criticism. It's more leading into, how do you select the first one, right? What does that quadrant look like, the decision matrix, to find the best first deal?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's finding that first deal. We want it to be very valuable, but we also, want to balance that with speed. And we want value to come in, as quick as possible. And you see a lot of those deals, like as you were pointing out, press releases of deals and things of that nature. And that's fine. That does drive more eyes to you. But sometimes what happens is if you don't succeed in those, it can have a slippery slope effect, an avalanche effect of people talking to people talking to investors, and things of that nature. And so, we are definitely going to be very selective based on what we know we can do, what we know the value that we can, instill to our customer, and then, our assessment of, what does it look like on their end as well, for how they can network, influence what their customer base is, what their market access is, things of that nature. So, it's going to be a balance there, and it's an ambiguous answer, but it's going to be what's best for our company, but also the shareholders. So it's going to be a balance there.
I think you answered it right at the end. It's the balance between company and shareholders. You're going to get peppered with when's the first deal coming. So until the first one happens, it'll be when is it, and everyone's going to expect yesterday. So no pressure, never any pressure. But
sure.
Let me go here. Let me just take a quick pause. If anyone's got any questions, please go ahead and submit them. We've got a bunch here that I want to go through. There's some overlapping, so let me just scan them quickly and make sure that we get them addressed. First, let's just start with, from your estimation, who's your competitors? When you walk into a room now, and I know this is a loaded question just because we've seen so many synthetic biologies that are cell-based approaches flame out. Do you see that there are real competitors to what you're doing? All right, it appears Zach froze up again, so he'll rejoin here.
Okay.
I can answer. Oh, now you're back. There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's an interesting question. So during my time at Ginkgo, again, that was all about the number of deals, right? The KPIs were all tied to number of deals, and there's a whole host of reasons why that might not be the best route to go, and I think we can see that in the stock value right now. But that allowed me, inherently to uncover just about every company out there that was in our space in some sort of fashion. So we overturn every rock, right? And I can confidently say this is you don't want to say that you have no competition, because there's definitely competition. There's people who are doing things that are similar to us, right? But there's nobody out there, and I know this confidently, there's nobody out there that's doing what we're doing. So in terms of again, simplifying it down to the necessary, where we're taking complete enzymatic pathways from the beginning input to the desired output. There's nobody doing that, because nobody's figured out that secret sauce, and nobody can do that unless they license the patents from us to do that now. And so there are some companies that are using a hybrid approach. They're doing cell-based, and then they're taking that chemical intermediate to something that they call cell-free, because they're adding 2 to 3 enzymes to that chemical intermediate now and creating a final product. And I call that a hybrid approach. But you're still bound to some of those inefficiencies of that first part of the process, where you are using a cell-based molecule, and that really drives it towards uneconomic. And so they're definitely not where we are. And then there's folks who, again, call themselves cell-free, and they're more cell-free tools providers, where they're making some incredible tools that will help us potentially in the future. But they're not quite, a cell-free company doing what we're doing. So, it's a hard question to answer, or it's not a great answer, because we're making it sound like we're the only ones doing this, but it is truly, we are the only ones who are doing this and can do this because of the patented technology that we have. So the nearest competitors would be cell-based, but again, for a plethora of reasons, I could go through for half an hour. This technology just outcompetes that, every step of the process from beginning to intermediate to end. So.
No, look, and I appreciate that, and I encourage any investors that want to get into more detail, we can connect you with Zach and the rest of the team. I just finished the conversation on Friday where basically Yannick, the head scientist and researcher from NREL, was saying the same thing, that there's not anyone that's using a cell-free approach that can do this. So when you hear us on the front line, the banking side, saying that Invizyne is truly unique, you're now hearing it credibly from multiple sources that it's true. There are competition. Obviously, there's always going to be competition. Let me go through a few here. I think there's a question here. What are sources of revenue, and when does revenue begin, and how quickly can it ramp? I think you effectively answered that before, that the sources of revenue come from multitude, development fee, licensing fee, royalty, sales of enzymes. Those ramp as the products, depending on the market, actually get into market. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate. Yep.
Okay. Let's see. I have to ask so that people know that I asked. With over 30 NDAs currently, when would we actually see partnerships announced and accounts moving into commercialization? So if you can give us an exact day, time of the day, that would be awesome. Now,
let me check my
let's
calendar.
do it in Yeah, I know. Check your calendar real quick. generalities here. Obviously, is it weeks, months, quarters? I mean, what, as you look at this conservatively, and I'll disclaim that because whatever you put out here, no one will ever forget. So don't say weeks if it's not, unless it's going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, no, it's so summer, we had a lot of traction, winter through spring. Summer, there's a little bit of a slowdown just in general. That's how business goes because everybody goes on vacation. So, conversations become, weeks to a month apart. And so moving those conversations through the pipeline becomes a little bit slower, but now we're picking up the pace again. And so in terms of putting a definitive time on when the first ones are coming in, there's a lot of next conversations that I think are going to elucidate, some of those more clearly. But I can say that a handful of those conversations are moving substantially quickly to the point where, it could be as early as, again, to your point, Lou, I don't want to put any timelines on this, but next year would be a good target for the first deals to certainly come in. And again, it's not going to be the number of deals that we're going after because there's a slippery slope. You're going to have a failure added into that model, and those failures are then talked about, and it's a slippery slope downhill from there. And so we're going to make sure that each and every deal is something that's substantial and valuable for not only us, but for the shareholders as well. Next year certainly is doable.
Yeah, as we head into next year. Okay, so let me ask, this is one that goes along with that. And this, I think, is a smart question. How much staffing up is required once we get past the IPO to enable some of these deals that you're considering? Is there a big role, ramp up in staffing, or is this something that with the potential partners you're in discussions with, it could easily roll out with the existing staff?
This is existing.
Okay.
I think we're taking the view that, until we actually truly, sorry, am I still here? It says my connection's
unstable. You're here.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good now.
I don't know what's going on, but until we actually need it, we're not going to be one of those companies that's going to, outgrow our skis here. We're going to add as needed, and sustainably, right? And so if we bring on 3-4, different partners and we need more management of those partners, that's fine. But in terms of the outreach and the conversations and whatnot, it's not something we can't handle ourselves right now. And, to Lou's point, we're in active conversations with over 100, but we've identified, over 300 potential partners. So we're still going after many, many, many more different partners out there. So, yep.
Let's get into this. This comes up in a couple ways, just about how you protect basically your unique evolution in synthetic biology. So let's talk about, from your vantage point, as you sit there as the head of biz dev, how do you protect IP protection versus trade secrets? And then how do you protect that advantage as you get into actual working with partners? You mentioned before exclusive, non-exclusive. How do you prevent what is unique to Invizyne from going to customers and the competition?
Yeah, what's interesting, and I think the team here has done a great job. I'm sure Tyler and Paul could probably talk to this a little bit more eloquently, but they've put out patents. There's some trade secrets, but they themselves have kept a lot of the secret sauce from even me, right? So I can't go out and say anything that I'm not supposed to do, and that's how it should be. There should be folks within the organization that hold the secret to the Coca-Cola recipe, if you will, and we'll never let that out of the vault. And so there's, they truly can't do it without that little tidbit of information. And so when we do work together, we're going to make sure that the definitive agreements are truly ironclad, in a way where, it's, if there's exclusivity, it's written a certain way, and if it's non-exclusive, it's also, written a certain way. But we're going to make sure that secret sauce never gets out in a way that could harm the company.
Yeah. So question, maybe this goes part and parcel with that in terms of the enzymes are key to these processes, any partnership deals, right? It's an enzymatic pathway that produces something. We're getting a couple questions here on how do you source, is Invizyne going to source those enzymes or create those enzymes and sell them, or source them from somewhere else? And if you do it, and do you have the capacity to do that for initial deals?
Sure. And so that plays into, what we were talking about with immediate, intermediate, and long term. And so why the industrial chemical space might be pushed out a little bit further is because they need such a substantial amount of enzymes that a contract manufacturer is going to be needed. And so we're in active conversations with those entities. And, they're excited for working with us and bringing some of those enzymes to our process and whatnot. But you need such a substantial amount of enzymes for that industry that's it elongates that scale up process a little bit. But there's a plethora of CMOs out there that'll do it for us. Now, in terms of the foods, flavors, and fragrances of pharma, you only need such a small amount of enzyme that we can actually produce substantial quantities of those enzymes ourselves to feed those markets. And if we
that's a low volume, high value, and fully capable of doing that.
Yep. And so we're capable of servicing those industries ourselves.
Okay. No, that's good perspective. A couple other things here. Where do nutraceuticals, non-regulated additives fit into the mix? Is that under foods, flavors, and fragrances, or is a mix between that and pharma?
Yeah, so foods, flavors, and fragrances would cover nutraceuticals, cosmetics, basically anything within that kind of bubble that's not pharma. Now, there's a gray area with some nutraceuticals where they're taken through, some clinical trials, if you will, and we'll address those as they come up. And we're working with some folks there because, again, some folks want to take some of the more, nutraceutical ingredients that have been classified as magic, if you will, or snake oil, and they want to show that it actually works and things of that nature. And so you have to take it through some of those trials. And so when that comes up, we'll do that. But that nutraceutical space, it kind of toes that line between pharma and foods, flavors, and fragrances.
Yeah. All right. I think that rounds it up. I got a couple related to the offering. I'm just going to answer quick, give you a breather, and then I'll give you a chance to just make some closing remarks. Anything else you want to share that we didn't get into today? So a couple questions here: status and timing of the offering. Indications are due by Monday. That's the deadline that we put out, and we're looking to go begin trading on or before August 15th. Question here: does any lockup period apply to investors? No, there's not a lockup, but we strongly discourage people that aren't longer-term investors from participating. We've never been a trading shop, an IPO shop. We're looking to have an impact with all the technologies we bring to market. Another good question here: does QSBS or Section 1202 apply here? Yes, it does for the IPO. These shares would qualify for the Section 1202 exclusions on capital gains, which is either the greater of 10 million or 10 times your investment. If you have questions on that, we can provide some information, but we're not tax advisors ultimately. So we ask that you speak with your tax advisor. Question here: have we got a commitment for any potential customer? No, not yet. That's what Zach's going to leave and go get done right after we get off this call. And then questions about the burn rate. I don't want to put Zach on the spot for CFO questions. He did elucidate that there isn't a ramp up required for him to go out and sign deals. So that's not a limiting factor. We can answer those questions separately. Last one here, Zach, let's see. I think is relevant. Maybe you wrap up your final comments here. There's been a lot of quote unquote failures in this space and missed expectations. How do you overcome this perception, and what can you point to prove the difference as you're having conversations with potential partners?
Yeah, first and foremost, you point to the technology. Anybody who understands the technology differences between us and the synthetic biology players out there. And again, this comes back to my background, where I can convey some of these differences and the value in these differences to just about any audience successfully. But it comes down to the technology and what Tyler and Paul and the team have built. We're so vastly different, and there's again, every part of the process from beginning to middle to end. We're different and we're better. And so, you can point that out, but also business models, right? Or business strategies, if you will, when people try to compare us to other companies who've gone after the amount of deals and not necessarily the best deals, and how slippery of a slope that is, and what you're seeing in the markets right now, we can point to as well. But all of these things on top of some of the proof of concepts and the case studies that we have, all of that combined into that picture really separates us from a lot of these a lot of these other entities and some of the skepticism that's going on. I always tell the team, it's not a race against ourselves in terms of getting to market and things of that nature. We know we're good, and we know we can overcome any challenges that kind of come our way. But to the questionnaires point, every company in the space that fails, is a black eye on the industry, and it's up to us to differentiate ourselves and convey that value to whatever potential partner we're having. So there's a lot of someone closed the door on some different. We're not another cell-based technology, and we're not using this type of cell. We're using this type of cell. I mean, we're cell-free. We're truly different. It's a 180, and so that difference gets us that foot in the door to have that conversation, and it's been working. So.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, one, I want to thank you, and then just share. I mean, obviously, I think you've stepped up to the task and the difficult task of answering a lot of the questions that we've asked. I mean, you shared that you've got over dozens of NDAs that are in place, that over 100 conversations, that some of these conversations have moved to talking and discussing terms, which I believe is stage 2, stage 3 in your business development pipeline, and that you're entering really a seasonally strong period for interest, right? Coming out of summer, I believe you got a bunch of conferences coming up. So the trajectory, the tone and tenor of the conversations, there's inbound as well as outbound. You're enthusiastic, but what I really appreciated about, and I think it's self-evident to anyone here, is that you're really thoughtful about what's going on. You recognize the difference and unique opportunity Invizyne has, but then also the risk of doing the wrong deal first. There's a real responsibility both to shareholders, the company, and the industry. And I think that just lends, Zach, to your experience, both at Ginkgo and then as being a scientist first as well. So as a shareholder that with a vested interest in this as well, I thank you for that thoughtful approach, and thank you for making the time today on limited notice. Congratulations on your new baby. Boy or girl? Girl. I've got the boy, you got the girl. So everyone just understand that he's a new dad and made time for all of us, and just really appreciate it. And if anyone has additional questions, you know how to get in touch with us. We're obviously more than willing to answer and get you in touch with the right people to drill down into further details. So again, thank you, Zach. Thank you, everyone else, for listening today. And we'll put a replay up shortly and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again.